Joining us on the program, the author of the brand new book, At the Brink, Will Obama Push Us Over the Edge? Dr. John Lott. Dr. Lott, thanks for coming back on the program, sir. Good talking to you.
Well, great to talk to you again. It's been a little while.
It has, and you've got a brand new book out, At the Brink, Will Obama Push Us Over the Edge? I know a lot of our audience very familiar with your work, More Guns, Less Crime. This book, does this focus just on Second Amendment issues, or are you taking a broader look at the administration's policies in general and what they mean for us?
Right. Well, there is a significant discussion on guns, but it's much broader. I mean, I think Obama's legacy is going to be on guns. He's going to have a significant negative impact on people's ability to own guns, probably more than a lot of people realize, unfortunately. But he's also having a negative impact on the quality of health care that people are going to be receiving. He's already had a bad impact on that, as well as on the economy, as a lot of people know, and regulations in general, not just regulations on guns. But I'm trying to look at his legacy and on the case of guns, for example, trying to point to what still can be done to fight the types of changes that he's trying to put forward, trying to focus on what's kind of the big rules that are trying to go forward at both the federal and the state level. It's amazing. This is the first time I've ever known of a president calling up and lobbying state legislators, or at least having his administration do that, to twist arms. I was in Colorado a couple weeks ago at invitation from both Republican and Democratic lawmakers, and the big buzz around the state capitol was that Vice President Joe Biden had just spent a couple days calling up 7 members of the state house there, getting them to switch their votes on the bill, and it was enough to get those 4 gun bills that got through the state house passed.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, we were actually talking about this on yesterday's program, because now that these bills are over on the Senate side, you would need 3 Senate Democrats to say no, we're not going to vote for these bills. Apparently, there are 2 that have gone on the record as saying they will not vote for these bills. There is a 3rd member of the state Senate who's a Democrat who has been, I guess, getting a lot of pressure from both sides. Again, gun owners contacting her office, urging her to reject these bills. But as you say, Biden, from what we understand, came in and said, look, we'll protect you. We'll make sure you guys get the money that you need in your reelection bid. We'll come in and we will support you if you cast these votes for gun control. Now, what's fascinating about this, Dr. Lott, is that this, you know, if that's the argument, in essence, it gives lie to what President Obama said in the State of the Union address, that this time it's different, that Americans want these gun control reforms. If Vice President Biden is having to lobby these legislators and say, we will overcome the opposition that you will receive from your constituents by simply outspending your opponent. We'll get third party money in, PAC money coming in for your reelection bid. Doesn't that indicate that these actually are unpopular bills, and the administration is going to have to try to outspend candidates who would have a message of, well, look what these guys have done to your rights?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm sure on some issues the polls do show support for changes, but on others they don't. And we have a republic, and legislators have to do what they think is right on these things. I think on things like the background checks expansion, one of the things I go through in the book is just the false statements that Obama's made on that, and I think they've had an impact on people's perceptions, unfortunately. When the president goes and claims that 1.7 million prohibited people have been prevented from buying guns because of the Brady Act, or that 40% of gun sales are done without background checks, I think a lot of people found those things shocking, and it has an impact. Unfortunately, they're both false, and relatively little of the media tries to correct these types of things. I mean, I'll just go through the first number on the 1.7 million prohibited individuals. What he should be saying there is that 1.7 million initial denials have occurred. But there's a huge difference between initial denials and prohibited individuals prevented. And I suppose the easiest analogy I could give to that is the late Senator Ted Kennedy. He was on the no-fly list 5 times. You could say there were 5 times where he was initially denied being able to fly.
Mm-hmm.
So he later flew. And would anybody go and say those 5 initial denials were 5 times that we stopped a terrorist from flying? Presumably not. And yet that's the way we go and describe what's happening with these background checks. So one of the reasons why I wrote the book is to try to go through and just deal with some of those false claims, hopefully before too many of these votes occur, to try to educate people, or at least give people the tools that they can go to educate others on these issues.
You know, as you say, the background check issue is fascinating. We saw last week in the Senate hearing the chief of police in Milwaukee go toe-to-toe with one of the senators and say, you know, look, this is these are paperwork violations. I'm busy fighting crime. I don't have time to prosecute these paperwork violations. And yet, Dr. Lott, you know, if they're talking about so-called universal background checks, then what they're talking about is more paperwork violations. I confess, I don't understand the logic that they're using here. If we need to expand these background checks, we're not prosecuting individuals who try to buy guns illegally, and we're not going to, but yet somehow the background check itself is going to prevent these individuals from then going to the black market and obtaining firearms illegally. I don't get that.
Well, my own belief is that the reason why they're not prosecuting a lot of these cases is because they're really not violations of the law, and that you're actually getting these types of false positives that we just talked about with regard to the example with the Kennedy case and the no-fly things. You know, when you have common names, you know, like Jim Smith or Bob Wilson or whatever we want to have there, and even when you include a birth date, you're going to run into a lot of people who are going to have the same names and same birth dates around the country, and some of those people are going to be prohibited, and that creates these false flags that go up. And here's the problem, and that is, for a lot of these people, these initial denials may simply be an inconvenience. But what I try to argue, and at the Brink, is that with such a large number, you're going to have a small but significant number of people who need to get a gun quickly for self-defense that are going to be stopped from doing so. And that has real consequences for people's safety. And we just can't ignore that. That you have to balance off how many criminals we're stopping, and I think it's very few, and versus how many law-abiding citizens we're preventing from buying guns when they should be able to, and we're preventing them when they're being threatened or stalked. You know, basically, I would just point out that there's another problem even beyond these initial denials, where you have about 5 to 7 times more individuals who were delayed for up to 3 days because their checks took longer than the 2 hours in which instant check is defined as occurring. Mm-hmm. And even a 3-day delay, my research shows, can have real safety impacts on people. That when a woman's being stalked or threatened, making her have to wait 3 days can be the difference between whether or not she's going to be able to defend herself or not.
Absolutely. And I know in Colorado in particular right now, it sounds like the Colorado Bureau of Investigation having trouble meeting not only the deadlines for or the counties, rather, not only having deadlines for meeting concealed carry applications, but we are hearing problems of delays with the background check system. And again, if you expand the background check system in Colorado, are you going to be able, or nationwide, are you going to be able to do that without, again, putting people at risk? We've heard the president say, you know, if it saves just one life, well, how many lives might this cost?
No, exactly. That's what I try. That exact argument is one of the things I spend some time on and at the Brink. I mean, it makes as much sense to go and say we should have a law because it saves one life as it would be to say we shouldn't have a law because it costs one life. What we need to look at is not just one case or one anecdote that we can go and bring up, but we have to look at the net effect. And that's one thing that I think the president just completely ignores. He completely ignores the costs of the laws that he's trying to push. And you know, and at the Brink, I try to go through the different laws that the president's pushing here and that we're seeing pushed at the state levels. I mean, including things like the these registration and licensing rules that you're seeing pushed in some of the states, like Maryland, for example, which are really going to have a huge detrimental impact on public safety, I think, because you're going to disarm people, and you're particularly going to disarm the people who benefit the most from having guns, which tend to be poor people, particularly minorities in high-crime urban areas. They're the ones who aren't going to be able to afford all these costs and fees that are being imposed.
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely right. I mean, we already see this in places like New York City and Chicago, Illinois. I mean, the process of becoming a gun owner in New York, you've got to be prepared to take time off of work on multiple occasions, go down to police headquarters, sit for your interview, pay hundreds of dollars in non-refundable fees before your application is approved or denied. You can be denied for any reason or no reason whatsoever. Again, I mean, I think the way that New York City does things right now gets in the way of people being able to exercise their constitutional right to keep and bear arms. And they want to take this nationwide, make it even worse?
Right. Well, and just also the things that, we're talking about expanding these background checks. One of the things, I mean, it's just a simple example. We already have this huge false positive problem. They're not trying to fix it at all. If anything, it's getting worse. And it's going to get a lot worse if they throw in a couple more million names into the hopper there, because it's going to be more and more likely that more people are going to find that they're on the flag list there because there's somebody else who has a similar name to themselves who really is prohibited. And, everybody wants to try to keep a criminal from getting a hold of a gun. I feel strongly about that. I think everybody else does. But you also have to feel strongly about stopping law-abiding citizens. And, we may also want to stop people with mental illnesses from getting guns. But even Senator Chuck Schumer of New York indicated that we're just, of the people who are going to be prohibited, only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction. He didn't say exactly, but it sounded like it could even be less than 1% from the way he was talking, are people who actually pose a risk of violence to themselves or others. And so you have to say, well, how many people are we really preventing there versus how many law-abiding citizens are going to be stopped from being able to protect themselves because we're throwing in millions of names when we should really only be concerned about a tiny, tiny fraction of those millions of names.
Well, absolutely. And again, if this was a serious discussion, then maybe that point, Dr. Lott, would be addressed. But it seems like we're seeing a very unserious discussion on the part of these gun control advocates. I mean, my attitude is, look, if regardless of what your feelings are towards the Second Amendment or gun ownership, gun control, ideally, if it's going to work, if it's going to be effective, it should be it should impact the criminal. It should impact the person who cannot legally acquire a firearm more than it's going to impact the law-abiding gun owner. And with all of these bills that we're seeing here, it seems like at the end of the day, the bad guy is still going to be able to illegally buy a firearm or illegally acquire a firearm a lot faster than the law-abiding individual is going to be able to legally exercise their right to keep and bear arms. And that just seems backwards to me.
Right. Well, I mean, I agree with you, and that's exactly the reason why I wrote the book, to try to help educate people, try to give them concrete arguments on these things so that they can try to convince others as well as legislators, because this is not part of the debate that's getting out. But they need to know more than just kind of the general points here. They have to know kind of the mechanics of the arguments and how to respond when they're brought up.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Dr. Lott, I cannot thank you enough, sir, for coming on the program today. The brand new book, At the Brink, Will Obama Push Us Over the Edge? Thank you so much for your time, and hope we can have you back again very soon.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you.